But I am glad to know that you are all out there, and it's some of you I know I haven't seen for a long time. For those of you who don't know me, I am Reverend Nita Strauss. Oh, and I want to say hello to the online people as well. You are certainly, your presence is with us because we all know there's no time, space, or distance in spirit. So it doesn't matter if you're watching live or if you're watching 3 years from now on a Thursday afternoon because you just can't take your office anymore. We welcome you and we know that you are here with us. So I was the minister of Unity Spiritual Center of Peace here in Tucson, a ministry that I co-founded with a good friend of mine many, many years ago. And our two communities have had a nice flow between them for many years. And I was reminded today that we hosted Reverend Janice's ordination. And it's just been a good thing to see actual humans come together again on a Sunday morning. I started my New Thought journey officially with the term New Thought right at exactly 40 years ago. And I know this because my son turned 41 years ago. He turned 41 on Wednesday. I do not know how that happened exactly, but it did. You know, there's something to evidence that I have to honor. And I actually discovered at that time, religious science of mind minister from Southern California who had a television show that was on at weird times of the night. Times that a new mother might be up with a crying baby, or times that a new mother might be grabbing 30 minutes of time that the rest of the house was asleep. And so it's always been interesting to me of how my journey has sort of gone back and forth on different paths of New Thought. And just as a little funny sort of weird thing that I think about sometimes, when I first moved to Tucson, that was back in 1990, I was looking for the religious science church here. I couldn't find it. I didn't know my way around. We did not have Google and Siri and all of those people. And I never did manage to find the CSL group that I know was here, but it was not here to me. So that was sort of one of my first little lessons was, okay, well, maybe there's something else. And so I took a little detour into Unity and found out that the two major groups in New Thought have very little to separate them. If there is any separation, it's a veil that we have made on our own. And it's really just a matter of where do you feel most comfortable. And I enjoy feeling comfortable in this space with you people as well. So I enjoy every chance that I get to reference a Pixar film. I normally, I will admit, and my son has, I've offered to pay for therapy if this is needed. I am not really a child-oriented person. Kids were hard for me. Parenthood was hard for me. Obviously, I love my son dearly. Motherhood did not come naturally. And I was so happy when he grew up enough that I didn't have to go to the movies and watch all sorts of those kid movies at that time. And just about that time, Pixar came around. And I was just enchanted. I've just been enchanted. And so when I got the notes for this month's focus, and it was Monsters, Inc., it was like, oh, my thing. And of course, I don't know, it doesn't matter if you've seen that movie or not, but if you haven't, it's a fun afternoon. Go make some popcorn. We can all stream pretty much everything these days. So the thing that starts off in Monsters, Inc. is it kind of looks like it's going to be a scary movie because, these cute little kids are all tucked away in their cozy little bedrooms with, their little boy toys and girl toys. And then strange things start to happen. And fear begins to build up. And we can't really see anything, and we don't know what's going to happen, but our hearts are just starting to pound a little bit more. Now, we know if we were the moms and dads in that other room, and our kids came and said, "Mommy, Mommy, there's a monster under my bed," what would we be saying? There's no such thing as monsters. Go back to sleep. But yet, there are monsters under the beds and in the closets. And what it turns out, just spoiler alert, it's not going to hurt you loving the movie. What it turns out is that at some point, they've discovered that the screams of young children are a great power of energy. And so the monsters are actually doing good work by collecting that scream energy to then power the world. And of course, there's much ado about a lot of things in the movie that you will find fun. But what that reminds us of is that there are things, just like, we tell our kids, no, there's no monster under the bed. But if you're the little 6-year-old laying there, and you're hearing the floorboards creak, and you're hearing what is maybe a twig on the window outside, are there monsters? In your experience, there certainly are. Well, now let's flash forward. Most of us are not 6 years old anymore. Most of us realize that there aren't really monsters. And how many of us have ever worried? Is there anybody in here who hasn't worried? Because if there is, I'm going to hand you the mic and let you explain how you got to that point. So what we have to realize at some point is that even though there may not be tangible entities called monsters, that indeed we, with our power of thought, have created fears. We have allowed ourselves to take a piece of a picture here and a piece of a picture there and a little piece of the mosaic from over here and combine them in a way that does not allow us to relax. We create stories. We create to fill in the white spaces. We see this over here. We overhear a statement there. And then we start filling in the blanks. And sometimes we fill in the blanks with good stories, and then we're happy. We've been able to create something that makes us happy, makes us contented, and then we are able at that point to say, oh, okay, it's okay, I know that's, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes we hear these bits and pieces, and the story we create fills us with dread and anxiety. And we can't sleep because we're worried. We may not be worried about a monster under the bed or about some supernatural creature going to fly out of the closet. But how many of us have stayed awake at night unable to sleep because of the monsters that we've allowed? And not only allowed, but created. We made them up. Now, I have some friends, a lot of friends who, and I'm one of these friends too, so keep in mind, I'm not just talking about you out there. I'm talking about all of us. Yeah, but did you hear what happened? Yeah, but did you read about what they did? Yeah, but. And it's really challenging sometimes to, in your own mind, to simply hold a space of wholeness at that point. Because I may know on a Sunday morning, I will tell you, I am very, very happy with the way that my learning and practicing all of the new thought principles and tools that we have in our lives. I am so thrilled with the changes that have happened in my life over the past 40 plus years. I can look back, and there are times that I don't know what I would have done had I not had these tools and principles. During the time of the worst time of COVID, I became very ill. It wasn't COVID, but it just coincided with all of the talk of illness and all of that. And I cannot imagine how many nights I just couldn't figure out what I was going to do, how was I going to get better, but I knew that I had friends who could remember truth for me. In those times, I couldn't hold truth for myself. There was just too much space between my experience and what was truth and what is truth. But knowing that I had people who could hold that space of truth for me and with me, I could sometimes relax and get some sleep. We all have times that we start piecing together stories, that we begin to really believe in the truth of outer circumstances. We begin to think that because a newspaper we respect published something, that it may be factual, but just because it's factual does not mean that it is truth. And if you're new to New Thought and you're going, well, what do you mean? Aren't facts and truth the same thing? They are not. There's this thing that we talk about, which is like capital T truth and capital R reality and capital A absolute. And then there are words that we use in our language to indicate that things are true from a human viewpoint. But factual and the facts of earthly things and the capital T truth of absolute reality are not necessarily the same. And, if you want to check that out, just think about your own life. When was coffee good? Now coffee's bad. I don't know the status of coffee right now. Eggs are good? No, eggs are bad. No, they're not really. I don't know the status of eggs right now either. I have kind of quit on all of that. I've kind of just said to myself, you all can do whatever you want with that. I am going to go to my own wisdom within me and choose to follow the guidance that is within me, because that I know that when I am centered, that I can trust the truth that is in me. And I know that if I start getting wrapped up in the monsters of the news and the monsters of all of the you should do this and you shouldn't do this and don't ever eat that. How many times do we have to see that? Don't eat that. And for some people, that'll be helpful. For others, it will simply stimulate fear. Oh my God, I've been eating that every day for 45 years. What's going on in my body? Oh. So when we talk about monsters, when we talk about that seed of fear that is so close to the surface, I would almost be willing to bet, but I'm not going to require any hands to be held. I will raise my hand to represent all of you, that every single one of us in this room, between the time we woke up this morning and we sat down in one of these chairs, at some point, some fear, some worry, some anxiety came to mind. It's simply a part of the human experience. We all know, we've all heard that there's that lizard brain in all of us, that amygdala part, that's the most prehistoric part of our brain. And you could all probably follow along with this. There's 3 responses to fear that we have, aren't there? There's fight, flight, and freeze. So those are the facts of having a human brain. When you get threatened, when you get worried, your 3 responses, you get triggered into that. And no matter how much we know there are no monsters, to your lizard brain, which we still have, We didn't get all of this good part of a brain and that other part went away. That other part's still there. Just like the scared little 5-year-old who was really afraid of the monsters under their bed is still inside you. What we need to remember is that there is a fourth option. There's a fourth option, and this one is the one we need to remember. We can choose to fight. We can choose to just get out of Dodge. We can choose to freeze, hope that we are playing dead well enough that no one will really notice it and the dinosaurs will just eat the people that are running around like crazy. Or we can stop. We can pause. We can breathe. And we can turn within and remember what we are. And notice I said what we are, not who we are. We all have a human personality. We all have a human identification. We are all humans walking on this earth, and we are all subject to that consciousness, the human consciousness. In the meditation before service this morning, we were actually reminded that the sort of the official New Thought term for that, it's like just humans believe this, is referred to as race consciousness. Over the years, we've kind of tried to shift that a little bit to collective consciousness. But there is that thing. You can tell when you walk into a room where people have been arguing. They may not be saying a word anymore, but can you feel that something is going on? You can feel it when you join in prayer and meditation with others. You can't see it, but you can feel that there's a depth to the stillness that maybe is not always something you feel. So we have these minds that are human. And what are we really? In truth, capital T truth, we are whatever name you want to give to that one power, one presence, the divine essence that is at the core of everything, whether you want to call it God, divine mind, Buddha mind, I don't care, call it George, if that works for you. But be very clear. Be very clear in remembering what you actually are. Because yes, you are having this human experience. One of my sort of beliefs that I console myself with sometimes when things aren't going the way I want them to go is that perhaps there's a point in our journey when we've left this human experience where we get to sit down at a table with everybody and there'll be everything we love. There'll be unlimited chocolate and, the best meals you ever ate. And we get to actually say, what was that about anyway? And that somehow we will learn what it is that those things that continued to confuse us were actually for. Now, my working theory, because, it's fine for me to have this nice little fantasy. It's a fantasy. I don't know what's going to happen. If anybody actually knew, I have hints. I've heard stories. I've had guidings. But, as far as what we actually know as humans, what I know is that my life works better when I recognize that all of those pieces of stories, usually generated by people that I have decided are monsters, that all of those stories are opportunities for me to come back to truth. That the best use of my human life is to remember that no matter what, I am the divine in essence. That I am whole, complete, perfect, necessary, and a unique expression of that one power, one presence that goes by any name you want to give it, even George. And if I see another human that I'm just shaking my head. How can that person think this thing? How could they do such a thing? My work in human expression is to hold that person in my heart, to be still, and to know that they are also unique and necessary and loving, that they are also that love of the universe in expression, and they have completely forgotten in this moment what they are. There's a New Thought author from the early 1900s that has spoken time and time again to me through her book, What Are You? And that's Imelda Shanklin. And I'm kind of on a one-woman mission to get everybody to read Imelda Shanklin. And it's okay if you don't, but you will be wiser if you do. She has a chapter in her book, What Are You?, that she has titled Real versus Fictitious. And in it, she tells a story of when she was a mid-teen. And that she said one of the things that she and her friends always liked to do was try and tell each other ghost stories. So one night, she said it just was really, really good conditions. It was kind of stormy, and we were just in this candlelit space, and I thought, I'm going to tell them a ghost story. And so she started telling this story, and they were still smiling. And she said, I'm not telling nearly a good enough story. So she said, I began piling on horror after horror, grotesque events after grotesque events. I went on and on and on until I froze. And she said she found out when her friends finally shook her and woke her up that she had told such a good ghost story that she took herself into such a state of fear that she was nearly catatonic. And her friends shook her and called her and finally woke her up, and they were all laughing at her. And she said, in that moment, I knew I would never tell another ghost story. I would never be entertained by another ghost story. I would simply have to live in truth. And this is what we need to do. We need to remember, whatever your practices are, the more current you keep them, the more likely you will be to remember them. I mean, that's just kind of, natural. The more you practice something, the better you get at it. It will still happen, I suspect, that you will still get up on a beautiful Sunday morning, look forward to coming together with friends, hearing good music, having all of this opportunity to know truth, and at some point, your brain is probably going to think, that guy cut me off. How many people is he going to kill on the way to, I'm just going to church here. Other people's actions. Your good is not dependent upon other people's actions. Will things sometimes happen because of other people's actions that affect you in a negative way, it seems? Yep. I've been fired. I've had the place I was living sold out from under me. I've been told my job was no longer there. And those things hurt. They're scary. They feel like things other people have done to you to hurt you. And if you remember what you are, you know that you are eternal life. You are eternal love. You are the expression of the divine here. And your work is not dependent on what others think, say, or do to you. But we have to remember that. So just a couple of quotes that I think are great. Ernest Holmes from The Science of Mind. One, alone in consciousness with the infinite constitutes a complete majority. Oh my gosh. One of my very first teachers taught me also to remember that one in connection with the consciousness is also the two or more gathered together that Jesus spoke about in those moments that we can't remember our wholeness. If we can look to truth, even if we don't remember, I am truth in expression, we can still align together, and that one power, that one presence that we are, will be there for us, that it will allow us to know what we need to know, that it will give us the strength and the power and the love and the light and the joy that we need to continue. There's another thing to remember about evil. Okay, another spoiler alert. There is no evil. There is no devil. There is no entity. If there were, as we heard earlier, then it would mean that that one power, that one presence was not really that. There is no oppositional power. Unity co-founder had this to say about fear and evil. Fear is a paralyzer. Even when we know we could do something, we don't because we're paralyzed. And that evil is a parasite. It only has the life that it takes from those who give it power. So as we close today, what I hope that you will do is allow yourselves to simply relax, to breathe. Just talking about fear and monsters and all of that, sometimes there's just this like, oh yeah, there's not any evil. Oh yeah, the devil is just a cartoon costume. I like that you have your prayer and meditation early in the costume room. If you haven't ever come, I really encourage you to come. There's something about having all of this falseness and fakery and holding truth, and at the same time recognizing that if there's a piece of you hanging on that wall that looks like a costume, but you're not wearing it because you're afraid of what will people think. What would people think if I showed up with pink hair? What would people think if I decided that feather boa had to be worn instead of a necktie today? Oh, I couldn't do those things. Well, maybe you could. Maybe it might even allow you to spread some joy and some happiness and to recognize, the other 365 days of the year, I will wear a necktie if the conditions of my employment or my social strata or whatever require it. But by gosh, today I'm wearing the feathers. And by doing that, we never know who we give permission to be their own more authentic self. So I hope that there's something here that will come back for you when you find yourself in one of those fight, flight, or freeze moments, or when you find yourself spinning around in your mind at 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking about the metaphorical monsters under your bed, that you will pause and breathe and remember truth. Thank you. I thought so. I wanted to just be, because ministers, we will just talk. We will talk and talk and talk until y'all are just saying, okay, now we know she's the monster under the bed today. So that breath. Allow yourselves to invest. We say take a breath so frequently, but taking sometimes implies that you're not entitled to it. Allow yourself to invest in that breath. See if you can allow your shoulders to relax just a little bit more. Envision the area of your body where your human heart lives. maybe even touch it. And if that seems a little too kind of cutesy, cheesy, that's okay. Don't. But just focus where your heart lives. And remember that in our language, in our traditions, that the heart is where courage begins. The heart is where love lives. The heart is where we feel that swelling of joy. The heart actually pulses before there is a body to pulse. We know that heart somehow is the divine expressing within us, that it is the home of spirit. We know these things. We know, and we know that we know them. And sometimes our prayer is, I believe, help my unbelief. So in this moment, we come together and we know with and for ourselves, for all of those in this room, for all of those watching online, for all of the family, friends, neighbors, loved ones, we allow ourselves to radiate that love. And we remember that there is no outer line of circumference where our prayers stop. We send forth our love, our light, our joy, our knowing of truth. And we know that it does not stop. We know that we enfold in our hearts all others, all beings, even those that perhaps we would label as monsters. So we claim on this morning the knowing of truth, capital T truth, that there is only one power, one presence active, that presence, that power is the truth of what we are, and that we are that. God is, I am. We know, and we know that we know. So for just a moment together, let's enjoy some stillness. Holy Spirit, we give thanks. We give thanks to the truth of what we are. We give thanks to the gratitude that wells up within us when we remember this. We give thanks for the peace which is always at hand, for the kingdom of heaven within us that we can always inhabit. We always have the option of choosing peace. We accept this gift so gratefully. We accept the truth that we know. We accept the ever-present reality of spirit. We know that we know these things, and we give thanks that we know these things, and so it is. Amen. Thank you.